Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakya. Thank you for joining me for this evening's meditation and sutra study. This evening's practice will consist of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from the Brahma's Net Sutra, followed by a Dharma talk. The title of today's talk will be Striving for Peace versus Accepting the Status Quo. Before we get into that, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So, we'll start off with our guided meditation. I'll give you a moment to get into position. You can get into any position you want. The only rule is that you need to be able to hold it without moving for at least 15 minutes. And if you lay down, I ask that you please don't fall asleep. If you'd like some instruction, what I like to do is sit, legs crossed, back straight, chin slightly tucked. Left hand, palm up in my lap. Right hand, palm up on top of the left. Eyes can be closed, or if you'd like to keep them open, point them downwards at a 45-degree angle to eliminate visual distractions. And we'll begin like we always do with our breath. Breathing in and out through the nose. Breathing in this way sends signals to the parasympathetic portion of our nervous system, causing a feeling of calm to come over our body, signaling that we're safe and that it's okay to relax. With every inhale, we poke out our belly button like we just had a big meal. On every exhale, we relax. Finally, if we're unsure what to do with our thoughts, we simply bring our focus to the physical sensations of our breathing. We focus on the feeling of air moving up and down our throats, the feeling of our stomach moving in and out, the feeling of our clothing against our skin. We'll breathe in this way for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. And if our mind wanders, that's okay. We just say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to our breathing. Good work. Now, as we continue with our meditation, we'll add a visualization to the exercise. Visualizing a fire burning in our belly, in the space just behind our belly button. This fire is our favorite color. If we like blue, the fire is blue. If we like green, the fire is green. With every inhale, we bring air into our nostrils, sending it down into our lungs. With every exhale, we exhale through our nostrils and visualize ourselves blowing on the fire in our belly, making it bigger and brighter with every breath, feeding it with the oxygen in our lungs. This fire represents our spiritual power. And now we'll use our breath to fortify ourselves for the week ahead. We'll do this for about a minute. I'll keep time. With every inhale, we bring air into our lungs. With every exhale, we blow on the fire of our enlightenment, amplifying it. We'll do this for about a minute. I'll keep time. Wonderful. Keep breathing. And as we do that, we'll add to the visualization, imagining a channel of energy going down from the fire in our belly, down, down, down to the center of the earth. And once we get there, we find an energy that's identical to our own. If our energy is red, the earth's energy is red. If our energy is yellow, the earth's energy is yellow. When Buddha realized enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he did so by reaching down and touching the earth. And now we'll do the same. With every inhale, we'll pull energy up into ourselves, matching the earth's energy with our own, storing it in our belly. With every exhale, we'll continue to feed that energy with the oxygen in our lungs, blowing on it, making it even bigger and even brighter with every breath. We inhale, pulling energy up from the earth, and we blow on that energy with every exhale, feeding the fire of our enlightenment. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. And if our mind wanders, we simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to our breathing and to the visualization. Good work. Everyone's sitting so quietly and so still. There's a wonderful energy, feeling of calm. Now we'll continue with our visualization, imagining a second channel of energy going up from the fire in our belly, up past our solar plexus, past our throat, up out the top of our head. Now with every inhale, we pull energy up from the earth, storing it in our belly. With every exhale, we push that energy up, up, up out of the top of our heads until it explodes like a volcano, showering every inch of us in healing spiritual light. So again, with every inhale, we breathe in through our nose, pulling energy up from the earth, storing it in our belly. With every exhale, we breathe out through our nose, pushing the energy up, 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 out the top of our heads. Inside a volcano of enlightenment explodes and showers every inch of our person. We'll breathe in this way for about a minute. I'll keep time. No need to worry about that. And if our minds wander, we simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to our breathing and to the visualization. Wonderful. Good work, everyone. Now it's time to bring our meditation to a close and continue with this evening's practice. So slowly, gently, we close off the channel of energy going to the top of our heads until it barely reaches our nose, barely reaches our throat, barely reaches our solar plexus, and finally stops right there where it started in our belly with the fire of our enlightenment. Next, we do the same with the energy channel going down to the center of the earth. Noticing that even though the earth fed us today with its wisdom and its compassion, the earth isn't depleted. The more it gives, the more it has to give. So maybe we give a silent bow and say thank you to the earth for helping us in our practice. Then we pull the channel of energy up into ourselves till finally we stop right where we started, with that fire burning in our belly. And recognizing that we can call on this energy whenever we need it. We allow the visualization to fade. We come back into our bodies by moving our heads to the left, and then to the right, back and forth. And coming back to center, we roll our shoulders forward. And back. Alternating. Feeling the physical sensations. Until finally they hang limply towards the ground. And now, if our eyes are closed when we're ready, and only when we're ready, we open them. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that with me. Sangha is so important. Group meditation is so important. So this is quickly becoming the favorite part of my week. I hope that's true for you as well. So we'll continue with our reading from the Brahmasnet Sutra using the English Tripitaka translation. BDK English Tripitaka translation. Not necessary to have a copy of the text, but it's useful if you'd like to follow along. Today's reading will start from page 29. And we're continuing with our readings of the 10 grounds. We're on number 6, the ground of the floral radiance of the essence. My disciples, Bodhisattvas at the ground of the floral radiance of the essence are able in all realms to avail themselves of the 10 kinds of supernatural cognitive powers in order to manifest various forms for all sentient beings. Through knowledge of the divine eye, one knows all the lands and the three divisions of time. One knows all the infinitesimal bits of form that combine bit by bit to constitute the bodies of the sentient beings within the six destinies. Every single body's infinitesimal subtle forms that materialize great form are known bit by bit. Through knowledge of the divine ear, one knows the sounds and the cries of suffering and pleasure coming from the sentient beings in the six destinies, in the 10 directions, in three divisions of time. One knows not non-sounds and not non-voices, all Dharma voices. Through knowledge of the divine eye, one knows all forms and non-forms, neither male nor female forms. In one thought moment, one functions in innumerable bodies and lands and eons throughout the 10 directions and the three divisions of time in great and small lands. Through the divine knowledge of the minds of others, one knows the activities within the minds of sentient beings in the three divisions of time. One knows the content of each thought of all sentient beings in the six destinies of the 10 directions. All matters of pain and pleasure, good and evil. Through divine knowledge of humans, one knows the past lives, the pain and pleasure, and the future rebirths of all sentient beings, in all the lands in the 10 directions and the three divisions of time. One knows every single life continuing for 100 kalpas. Through divine knowledge of liberation, one knows the liberation of sentient beings in the 10 directions and the three divisions of time, the removal of all afflictions, whether numerous or few. From the first ground up to the 10th ground, all are completely extinguished one after another. Through divine knowledge of meditative states, one knows the meditative and non-meditative states of the minds of all sentient beings. In the lands of the 10 directions and in the three divisions of time, one also knows the non-meditative as well as the not non-meditative states. The methods of producing meditative states, along with all included states of samadhi, the 100 kinds of samadhi. Through divine knowledge of enlightenment, one knows the attainment of enlightenment and the non-attainment of enlightenment of all sentient beings, up to knowing the minds of every person in the six destinies, and also up to knowing the minds of every person in the six destinies, and also knowing the Dharma that is expounded in the minds of the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Through divine knowledge of recollection, one knows the lives of sentient beings throughout 100 kalpas, 1,000 kalpas, and within greater and lesser kalpas. Whether these lives are long or short, through divine knowledge of aspirations, one knows every single aspiration and resolve all the stages of the 10 grounds and the adepts of the 30 stages. Whether seeking pain or pleasure, the Dharma or non-Dharma, all kinds of seeking completely, including the 10 vows and the 100,000 great vows. This person abiding in the grounds with access to the 10 supernormal abilities manifests countless distinct functions of action, speech, and thought, which are called the merits of the grounds and which cannot be exhausted in 10 billion kalpas. It is precisely these upon which Shakyamuni has expounded in a concise manner in the chapter on supernormal abilities. This is the same as that which is explained in the chapter on the contemplation of the 12 limbs of dependent arising. 7. The ground of the completion of the essential nature. My disciples, when bodhisattvas arise at the ground of the essence of completion, they enter into the Dharma of the category of the cognition of the 18 noble ones, which is not shared with practitioners of the lower grounds. This means that in bodily activity there is no taint or error. In verbal activity there is no fault in speech, and in thought there is no loss of mindfulness. Free from the 8 difficult circumstances, one is dispassionate in all circumstances, always remaining in samadhi. On entering this ground, there are 6 kinds of endowment, and furthermore, from this your cognition produces awareness of 6 kinds of completion. Since you are finally not subjected to the afflictive habit energies of the three realms, your wishes are fulfilled. Since all of the merits and all of the Dharma teachings that you seek are fulfilled, effort is fulfilled. Since all Dharma matters of the epic and the affairs of sentient beings are known in one instant, in one thought, mindfulness is fulfilled, since the characteristics of the two truths include all the dharmas of the sentient beings in the six destinies. Wisdom is fulfilled, since you know that the people in the 10 stages of the opening up a clear destination, as well as all Buddhas, are neither bound nor habituated, liberation is fulfilled. Since you see that all sentient beings know other sentient beings as their own disciples, and since you lack contamination and are without afflicted habituation, and since with your acumen you know other persons, liberation is fulfilled. This person enters into these 6 kinds of completion of supernormal cognition and directly gives rise to the cognition wherein his body accords with the mental functioning of the sentient beings in the 6 destinies. Since with his mouth he skillfully elucidates a chapter on innumerable Dharma gates, teaching all sentient beings, he accords with the mental functions of all sentient beings. He always enters samadhi while the great earth quakes in the 10 directions. Since empty space becomes adorned with flowers, he is able, using the endowment of great illumination, to cause the mental functioning of sentient beings to see the appearance of Buddhas in the world in all past kalpas. Here, using unattached cognition, he also reveals the mind of all sentient beings, showing them the minds and mental functions of all Buddhas and sentient beings in all the lands in the 10 directions of the present. Using supernormal cognition and knowledge of the path, he sees the appearance in the world of all Buddhas in all future kalpas. All sentient beings accept the way and hear the Dharma from this Buddha. Abiding in this level of the 18 Noble Ones, one is in samadhi in every mental moment, observing the atoms of the 3 realms to be the causes of your own body and seeing all sentient beings as your father and mother. This is because even though I am entering into this ground, I have already entered all merits, all divine illuminations, all teachings carried out by the Buddhas, up to the category of all the Dharma teachings in the 8th and 9th grounds. In all Buddha lands, one demonstrates the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment, his turning of the wheel of the Dharma, his entry into extinction, and his transformation of beings in all other lands in the past, present, and future. So when I was going over the sutra reading for this evening the other day, I was unsure what direction I wanted to take it in. In tonight's reading, we were told that all sentient beings are our mother and our father, and that we should treat them and respect them as such. We are told that if we understand the Dharma, if we drop into deep samadhi, we understand the atoms of this world are what create our own physical bodies and are in fact not separate from them. So the text is continuing with this idea of being emptied of emptiness to the point that we see everything in the world as part of ourselves. And then I was told by a friend of mine that yesterday, September 21st, was International Peace Day, which is a holiday created by the UN to remind us to strive for peace and harmony in the world. So I began to think about peace, what it is from the world's perspective, what it is from the Buddhist perspective, and also the relationship, the tension between peace and the status quo. How the world is as compared to how we want it to be. And how our spiritual practice and activism can fit into that if we decide to live our lives as activists. Now, the dictionary, according to Google, defines peace as freedom from disturbance and tranquility. So if we are peaceful, we have no disturbances in our lives, according to the dictionary. We are very tranquil, we are very calm. And according to that definition, though I think it's imperfect, and I'll explain why here in a moment, I feel comfortable in saying that Buddhism is a very peaceful religion. Which isn't to say that throughout history, Buddhists have not acted out violently, that we have not done things that are wrong, because we have. We are still human beings. But if we look at the doctrine, if we look at the teachings of the Buddha, he pushes us to strive for peace. Peace in our bodies, peace in our speech, peace in our mind, and by extension, peace in the world. Now, this idea, this hope for peacefulness, peace between us and all sentient beings, isn't something built out of a hippie dream. It's actually very rational and it's empirical. It's based on the Buddha's understanding and his recognition of the relationship between sentient beings and the world around them. This is explained in the Trikaya teaching of Buddhism, which states that we are all part of the same Buddha body. That all sentient beings are manifested from the Dharmakaya, the wisdom body of Buddha, in the same way that a wave is manifested from the ocean. Therefore, my health, happiness, and well-being are inextricably tied to the health, happiness, and well-being of all sentient beings. We can think of this as sharing a house with roommates. If my living area is dirty and smelly, then that means that the living area of all the people around me are affected. If I play my music loudly at 3 a.m, then no one else can sleep. If I leave rotten food in my bedroom, then eventually the smell gets out into the hallway. So this is why we as Buddhists place so much emphasis on our own spiritual practice. Not out of selfishness, but because we understand that if we can save ourselves from suffering, we will, by extension, save the world. If we make our minds peaceful and calm, if we make our speech loving and compassionate, then every time we speak to another person, we will speak to them with love, with compassion. Every time we think of something in our minds, if our minds are embedded in wisdom and not in greed, anger, and ignorance, then the things that come out of our minds, the fruit of our hands, will be impacted by that. Sometimes I think of handwriting. So if someone is in a calm, tranquil state, generally speaking, their handwriting is fairly legible. But if they're angry, if they're scared, if they're frustrated, it becomes scribbles. In Buddhism, we strive to live in a way that's legible and not in a way that scribbles. So all of our practices, the bowing, the chanting, the meditation, the sutra study, is all pushing us towards peace. This is why the sutra tells us to treat every living being like our mother, like our father, Because in the same way that we, when we're children, depend on our parents for comfort and support, whether we want to admit it or otherwise, even as adults, we depend on other people for support. The person who delivers our food to the grocery store, the cashier who checks us out, the gas station attendant who places gas in our car so we can drive that food home. Take any one of those people out of the equation and it suddenly becomes a lot harder to eat. The carpenter who built our house, the person who installed our air conditioning, the electric worker at the plant who keeps the electricity running through the wires so that we can power our refrigerators for our food. Take any one of those people out of the equation and suddenly our lives become a lot more difficult. So it's important to understand that when we talk about peace in Buddhism, it's not some sort of pipe dream. We're not hoping to create a utopia. This is us understanding exactly how the world works. Understanding that we are all interconnected like the threads in this robe. And if we pull even one thread from the robe, the whole thing unravels. But what is peacefulness according to Buddhism? Now, I think the dictionary definition was pretty good: freedom from disturbance, tranquility. But there's a danger there. And the danger is that sometimes we think that peace equals a life without conflict. And because we think that we as Buddhists have to avoid conflict at all costs, then we don't step in when we see things that are wrong. That we don't stand up against injustice, that we don't defend people who need to be defended because we're trying to keep the peace. But in Buddhism, we understand that in this samsaric world we live in, this world of suffering, there is no such thing as a life without conflict. It is not proper. It is not realistic to think that through our spiritual practice we will have a life with no conflict, with no tension. We know this from the first noble truth of Buddhism, which states life is suffering. And this, of course, doesn't mean that there's no joy or happiness in life. It doesn't mean that every moment of every second of every day is miserable. But what it does mean is that suffering is a natural, normal part of life. And if we understand that suffering is normal, then it puts a spotlight on every moment of joy that we experience. If we understand that starvation for most of human history has been the norm, then we are incredibly grateful every time we open our refrigerator and see food there. If we understand that through the vast majority of human history, violence has been a part of people's daily lives, then we are appreciative every time someone treats us with respect and with kindness. The problem in our society, the reason that peacefulness seems so far away is because we take it for granted. We think peace is the norm, and it's not. Conflict is the norm. Suffering is the norm. So instead of striving for peace, whatever. But if we look at the fire sermon, the Buddha tells us that everything we see, everything we hear, everything we taste, everything we touch, everything we think is burning. Thus the name, fire sermon, burning with the fires of greed, anger, and ignorance, burning with sickness and despair. The world is on fire. So conflict is inescapable. But we as Buddhists strive to deal with that conflict in a skillful way. We don't run from it, but we also don't charge towards it either. We practice the middle way. We avoid conflict when we can, and when we can't, we learn to work with it skillfully. If you live with people, if you have roommates, there's going to be conflict. I want to listen to my music at 3 in the morning. My roommate wants to sleep. That's conflict. Inescapable. So what do? We deal with that conflict skillfully by putting in headphones. If you're at a workplace and everyone is putting food in their refrigerator, that's the potential for conflict. How do we ensure that no one eats food that doesn't belong to them? Well, everyone puts their name on their lunch bag. Crisis averted. There's tension there, but tension isn't necessarily bad if we deal with it skillfully. Conflict isn't necessarily bad if we deal with it skillfully. So peace in Buddhism is not the absence of suffering. It's not the absence of conflict, because that's impossible. Whether it's us looking at that conflict, looking at that suffering with right view, which is the first tenet of the Noble Eightfold Path, and figuring out how can we work with this in the best way possible, a way that alleviates suffering, not only for us, but for all sentient beings. We can see this in the example of Buddha. Now, Buddha was a very, very peaceful man. He was a pacifist. So much so that if someone attacked one of his monastics, even if they attacked him, they were forbidden from defending themselves, to the point where monastics were kicked out of the Buddhist community for getting into physical fights with people. Now, does that mean we need to go out and let people punch us in the face? Of course not, but it's something to think about. He was a very peaceful man, but at the same time, he was not someone who just stuck with the status quo. He looked at what was going on around him, and if he saw injustice, he found a way to work around that skillfully. We can see this by looking at the caste system of India at the time, which still exists to this day. Now, I don't know all of the caste offhand, but there's a system where we have the Brahmins at the top, then we have the warrior class, and I believe it's the merchants, laborers, and Dalits. I could be wrong about that, but I know for a fact it's Brahmin, warrior, and then we have the Dalits at the bottom. And this is important because the way the caste system worked in India was that based on your karma, it decided what caste you were born into. And your caste came from your parents. So if your father and mother was a Brahmin, you're a Brahmin. If your father and mother are a Dalit, you're a Dalit. Why is this important? Because you were only able to marry within your caste. Not only that, but people of various castes were only able to have certain jobs. So if you were a Dalit, if you were at the bottom, you were kind of screwed. So much so that individuals in that caste were called the untouchables. People were so worried about their negative karma rubbing off on them that they would not touch these individuals. And even to this day, if you go into India, people who marry outside of their caste at times in certain areas have been killed or beaten. If one of the untouchables walks into a shop, people won't look at them. They'll refuse to sell them goods, or if they do sell them goods, they won't hand them the money or the garments. They'll throw them on the ground and look away. So that was the status quo for Buddha. In addition to that, women were looked down upon. They were seen as property. They were not allowed to engage in spiritual practice. It is believed that they, because they were women, weren't able to do it. That was the status quo in the time of the Buddha. So how did he respond to that? Now, we have to remember that the Buddha was a part of the warrior caste. Okay? He was a warrior and he was a noble. He was a member of the aristocracy. So the status quo was working very well for him. He was a prince, he was the son of a king, he had a kingdom. And to give you a sense of the power that his father possessed, the power that the Buddha was set to inherit, the king, when he would go out into the streets, would have sick people, old people removed from the streets, moved out of sight, so his son wouldn't see them. Because he didn't want his son to be exposed to the suffering of the world. Imagine that, having so much power, you could literally go outside and tell people, hey, I don't want to look at you. Go away. And they did it, because that was the status quo at the time. And that's where the Buddha was. He was at the top, or near the top, of the social hierarchy. He had, as we would call it now, a lot of privilege. But after the Buddha realized enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, after he realized that we are all part of the same Buddha body and that conflict, suffering is unavoidable, what did he do? He acted against the status quo. He acted against the injustice that was around him. He did this by leaving the palace, giving up his birthright, choosing not to be a prince any longer, to be a part of the warrior aristocracy. He did this by allowing all people to enter into the monastic order, regardless of caste. Even the people, the so-called untouchables of the time. He did this by allowing women to enter the monastic order and become nuns. And he did this understanding the potential consequences, that he could be beaten, that he could be killed. But he did it anyway. He did it because it was right. He did it peacefully. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't burn down any palaces. So he acted skillfully against the injustices of his time, but he still acted, regardless of how hard it made his life. And we as Buddhists have the power to do the same, because we follow this practice, we walk this path not because it's easy, but because it's right. We do the chanting, the bowing, the meditation, the sutra study, not because it's the status quo. It's not. We do it because we've taken a vow to end suffering for all sentient beings, and we understand that this is the best way to do it. By purifying our body, our speech, and our mind, so that the world around us can then be purified. This is why in Pure Land Buddhism we're taught that if we purify our minds enough, we will see the Pure Land all around us. And if we defile our minds, if we engage in the status quo, the greed, the anger, and ignorance that's fed into us every day by the media, the social media, the TV, etc. Well, now the land becomes impure. Now it becomes a place of suffering, a place of sadness, a place of despair. So as Buddhists, we choose to live in conflict with the status quo because we understand that all beings are our mother and our father. Because we look at other people and we see our own face. And out of compassion both for them and for us, we strive for peace. Even if it's hard. Even if the status quo is one of greed, anger, and ignorance, even if it requires us to give up a certain amount of privilege that we've become used to. And as we do this, as we walk this path of peace, as we purify our body, speech, and mind, we become more skillful in finding ways to both stand up against the injustices of the world and create lasting, loving relationships with the people around us, even if those people don't agree with our actions. It's not easy, but it is right. And the good news is we all have a nature which is Buddha, which means we have the wisdom, we have the compassion within us to do what needs to be done. We simply need to continue with our practice so that that wisdom and compassion is manifest in daily life. Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just make a few announcements before we close. This is Meditation Sutra Study. It happens every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern at this channel. We also do Dharma Sunday every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, also broadcast here at this channel. And that's a little simpler, a little less involved. I'll take some topic from pop culture or the news and I'll reflect on it using the Buddhist teachings and the Buddhist scriptures. So taking canonical Buddhist teachings and tying them with daily life. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and the notification bell if you got something from our practice today. If you hit the like button, that'd be great too. And until next time, Amitabha.